It's Funding Friday. We're going to talk in today's episode about why Sequoia bought shares of Zapier, why Chamath is SPACing Sofi,
and why Webflow and Descript are on the rise. Stay tuned. It is Friday, January 15th. This is the Piper Rundown. We analyze business and culture to help you win. Today's rundown is presented by JetStore. JetStore has been providing affordable, reliable, and easy to manage data storage and cloud solutions to over 4,000 customers worldwide for over 26 years. JetStore offers storage systems for private cloud hosting, video surveillance, Internet of Things, AI, machine learning, edge computing, data archiving, HPC, media production, medical imaging, and flight simulations. For more details, visit jetstore.com. Thank you so much for sponsoring the rundown.
That German Shepherd's crazy.
It's insane. Wildly competent in the gymnastics,
Dog gymnastics.
Dog gymnastics, which I didn't know was a thing until that video.
Speaking of wildly competent, Zapier has sold some shares of their startup to Sequoia, valuing the company at more than $4 billion. If you are not familiar with Zapier, it is a B2B technology SaaS that helps connect APIs from all sorts of different web APIs together.
Yes, it basically, if you get an email with a document attached, it'll automatically upload that document to Dropbox or whatever app you have connected for cloud storage, and then it sends you a notification to a messaging app that you now have this document. It makes everything so intuitive and really improves your workflow.
And that's just one example. It's any two web services that you may use. If they don't have natural functionality between one another, Zapier, without knowing how to code, allows you to set up these different processes.
So cool.
Zapier was a part of Y Combinator's spring 2012 class. And shortly after graduating from YC, the preeminent startup incubator on the planet raised a $1.3 million seed round from Bessemer Ventures, a blue chip venture capital firm. But since that point in time, they got profitable in 2014. Most of the founders founded it and spent a lot of time in Columbia, Missouri, in the middle of the country. But they've operated completely remotely. They have not taken any more outside financing and have just grown and grown and grown and grown, kind of in the backdrop. It's the type of service where if you use it, you'll love it. You're like, man, this makes my life so easy. And otherwise, it's not consumer facing. It's not publicly understood by most people.
Unlike most of the top companies that have come out of Y Combinator that you've heard of, like DoorDash, Gusto is up there, Instacart, Airbnb is the number one. Zapier is now the 8th largest company to spin out of Y Combinator, which is insane for a non-consumer facing company.
And of all the companies on the top of that list, easily the least amount of funding taken on in comparison to valuation. So that over $4 billion valuation, Sequoia gets in, they buy shares that the founders own. When you have an instance like this, where you've taken so little outside financing, those founders own a vast majority of the remaining shares. This is a moment of liquidity for them. They get to take some chips off the table, diversify, have some liquid cash that they can actually go, do things with. That money certainly goes a long way in Columbia, Missouri. And Sequoia, one of the preeminent, arguably the VC firm, gets a stake in this company with an enormous room to run. If you think about the business of connecting different digital services together, that is only going to expand. If you're brand new to setting up a Shopify store in 2020, if you're brand new to getting everything onto the cloud in 2020, if you're brand new to using Slack or any of these services, the kind of next outgrowth, when that service hits its limit of what features are built into the product, and you want to go a little bit further, Zapier or a similar type of tool is the avenue by which to do that.
Totally, and it allows people to break out of whatever ecosystems they're currently living in. Like if I say all the time how Google basically runs my life, but Zapier is something that can break you out of the Google or the Apple or the Microsoft ecosystem and actually use tools that are super effective and maybe better than something that you're currently working with right now.
Speaking of breaking out of pre-existing paradigms, most companies throughout the last decade have been going public via IPOs, but over the last couple years, we have seen an explosion in the frequency and the appetite for SPACs. And Sofi is going public via a SPAC. Chamath Palihapitiya's IPOE, his 5th SPAC in his ongoing forward march of the SPAC empire.
Yes, we've talked before about Chamath bringing Opendoor and Clover Health public via SPAC.
And Virgin Galactic.
And Virgin Galactic. This is just a continuing trend. It seems like that Chamath is very, very willing to buy in big with these companies that he believes in.
Yeah. So Sofi, real quick history, they've raised $2.5 billion since 2011. And the way, this is another rule, whenever there's a fintech company, it doesn't matter what kind of specific little narrow vertical they start in. The aspiration for every single fintech is to broaden its suite of offerings and become functionally a bank. And so Sofi, their path to all-encompassing bankdom started with the refinancing of student loans back in 2011. And for the first 2 to 3 years, while they were getting off the ground, that's what they were known for. They would help you refinance your student loans at a lower interest rate than what you may have had in some other instance. The way they argued that they could offer those lower interest rates was primarily based upon having a more machine learning informed, algorithmically informed, broader data set taken in on the borrower that gave them a better estimation of that person's capacity to pay them back. And if you get a cohort of people that have a higher likelihood of being able to pay back the debt that you're issuing them, you can offer a lower interest rate and still make a decent sized return. And once again, particularly in a low interest rate environment, that is the type of asset that people are always going to be in the market for in the large institutional investor crowd. So Sofi started there. They then moved into personal loans. You can see very clearly if you're building this algorithm for evaluating people's ability to pay back a student loan, not much different if we're talking about paying back a personal loan. Then they moved into mortgages. And then in the last few years, in addition to taking on a substantial amount of that $2.5 billion amount of fundraising, they've broadened into general banking services, savings account, checking account, and also the ability to trade both cryptocurrencies and securities. So sounds very similar to the bank that you probably bank in if you don't bank with Sofi. But now they are looking to go public. The IPOE, before it picked a target for its reverse merger acquisition, raised $800 million. That, plus probably a little bit more, will be piped into the company, added to their balance sheet, and is targeting about a $9 billion valuation. We will see how that changes upwards or downwards. These days it tends to be upwards because it's a crazy market once that actually goes public.
Crazy stuff.
Our third story is Webflow, and this is a Funding Friday if you have not picked up on that already. Webflow raises a $140 million Series B. They accomplished a $2.1 billion valuation. We haven't gotten one good billion yet. $2.1 billion valuation. Billion.
It's a good one.
Webflow, if you've never heard of them, similar to Zapier, and that is also going to tie into the third private funding that we're going to be talking about here. Webflow is a no-code website building solution. Now, there are a lot of solutions like that tangentially already on the market. You've probably heard of Squarespace. You maybe have heard of Wix or Weebly or some of these other offerings that say it is going to be wicked easy to get a website set up, create a new blog post, add text here, add an image there. It's all drag and drop, easy to go. Yes. But once again, if you are a practitioner of any of these services, you understand that there are still inherent limitations to what these platforms can do because they are optimizing for being as broadly easy to use, easy to start as possible. Their target demo is that person that is not the most technically sophisticated. They simply want ease of use and quickness to get up and online. What Webflow, similar to Zapier, and you'll see the through lines here, is it allows you to build a more complex website. So if you think about less of like a blog or a restaurant website. A restaurant website, you need a couple things. You need the ability to like set up a reservation online and read the menu and maybe see some about me of like the cuisine. Or if you think about a personal website, you need an about me page, blog posts, photos, portfolio, whatever. You think about a platform like Airbnb, which is trying to create a marketplace of sorts, or one of these services where there is more complex actual functionality on the website itself. Squarespace, these solutions are not built to provide that. Webflow, once again, allows you to do that in a no-code environment. So you do not have to be in there writing code in order to make your website highly functional. That's Webflow's kind of core insight and where they're fundamentally differentiated. I would argue that Webflow actually bootstrapped for 5 years before they took any sort of outside funding. And I didn't really know about them when we started our site. Not that that's the goal of our websites, but I would be fairly certain that the next website we spin up, we have 3, pipercreative.co, Going Deep with Aaron, and goingdeepsummit.com that we send a bunch of people to. The next one will probably be built on Webflow just because I think it's so important to be able to build that functionality into your site later on down the road.
Totally. I mean, Squarespace, Wix, Weebly, all those are so user-friendly. But with such limited functionality. And up until this point, you really did have to hire a coder or a website builder, and it was going to cost you a pretty penny, and this is just a much needed solution.
And they get to come in with a ton of leverage. They doubled their customer base in 2020. Their annual contract value has gone up substantially. It means that bigger companies, more complex orgs are getting onto the platform. Still a long, long way to go in their upward trajectory. And basically, the other thing to think about here is when you take on venture financing, the folks that went in at this $2.1 billion valuation, $140 million Series B, it's weird to think about this, but they're probably thinking about this in, okay, if Shopify came in next week or later this year and said, hey, we'd like to acquire you guys for $5 billion. That's doubling your money in a short period of time, but that is probably undershooting what they think the potentiality is here.
For sure.
And so one of the things that's kind of a statement that's been made in conjunction with this announcement of funding is they want to avoid M&A as long as possible, build, grow, and try to get that grand slam type of return as opposed to that really solid double.
And it really is obvious that they are capable of doing that because of the 5 years of bootstrapping. Like, they have the long game in mind.
And they've been able to be profitable because of that long period of bootstrapping, so they've got that muscle built. Speaking of a muscle built, a lot of orgs are trying to build the muscle of producing more content for themselves, especially audio and video wise. That is why we started our company. That is the service offering that Piper provides. And we are not alone in recognizing this market opportunity. We are not alone in having an idea of a novel solution to be able to make that happen. One of the solutions that is out there is a company called Descript. Descript has raised a $30 million Series B. And what they do is a very lightweight editing suite. So if you think about us, we use the Adobe Creative Cloud, these very high-powered softwares, so that we have the ability and the functionality necessary to do more and more complex, advanced tasks in our editing process. For a lot of people, they don't need that. What they want to do with their podcast is simply make sure that the sound is level, cut out the ums and ahs, and roll. If they're editing video, very similarly, there's plenty of YouTube channels. It's just a series of jump cuts. It's not particularly complex editing, anything like that. Descript allows you to do that very, very lightweight, substantially lower in a price point than the Adobe Creative Cloud, and also hopefully inject some AI into the process. It's a fancy way of saying a machine learning algorithm that understands some of the patterns, some of the likely edits that you might want to make in advance, which also expedites the process of editing, which can be very tedious, very repetitive in certain functions and certain instances. So the example of that is, if I have a podcast that's 35 minutes long, and over the course of that, me and the interviewee say or 27 times, instead of looking at sound waves and listening for that whole 35 minutes in order to find it, let's transcribe that using the numerous amount of AI transcribers that are out there that can hear spoken word, convert it into text, identify the ums and the ahs, and just jump cut those out as quickly as we can find them.
Yeah, Descript is super useful for captions as well. We just upload a video there and they auto-generate captions, are able to identify different speakers within the video and create an SRT file that you can automatically plug in over top of your video. Develop those captions for yourself. So it's super useful. I mean, we've had so many people say to us that when they see our videos on LinkedIn or on social media or something, most of the time they can't actually watch it or listen to it because they're in a work environment. So they read whatever captions we have on there, and it's a super useful tool. And with all of this video content coming out now, I think it's only going to be looking up for Descript.
Yeah, it's a growing market, growing appetite, great business to be in.
For sure.
Kobe.
R.I.P. Well, that's a rundown. Make sure you hit like and subscribe. And I've never said this before, but ring that bell. Get notified whenever we post a new video. Someone commented that they rung the bell yesterday, and I was like, oh, that's so nice of you.
So if someone doesn't know what that is, because some viewers are not,
Yes.
Crazy YouTube fanatics, explain what that means.
Yes. If you hit subscribe, there's a little bell notification next to the subscribe button, and basically if you click that, it notifies you whenever we post a new video. And I know that you want to be notified whenever we post a new video. Thanks for watching.